So since the release of Guncraft version 2.1, the way of changing or adding weapons to Guncraft has changed slightly. So if I first off go to my server, and then Garry's Mod add-ons and go to Guncraft and Lua, usually you would add weapons in the Guncraft_config. So in here, below this, usually the weapons would be, but they're no longer here. Now you instead have to edit this file, the Guncraft_weapons. When you open it up, there's a little explanation here, which explains what everything does. You can delete this if you want, has no effect. And So in here we will be able to add new weapons to Guncraft, and it's rather simple. To add a new weapon, you simply type guncraft.add_weapon, and then open with parentheses, and then open curly brackets, and we'll make some spaces here, and we will basically follow these examples down here. So if we say want to add a Colt 1911 from the M9K weapons pack, we will we'll do that. So it should be noted that the order of these different values, it doesn't matter, so we can do materials first if we want to. Yeah, but I'm just gonna do it the regular old way. So first we'll do the name, so we'll do name equals and then give it a name, in this case Colt 1911. And remember these quotation marks here, that's important. Next we'll do a comma to separate, sorry. Next up, we'll have the materials. So this is how many materials it will take to craft one of these, and this cannot be in quotation marks. So we'll say 30. Next up, the class name, and this is the scripted weapon class name of the weapon. So for the M9K pack and the Colt 1911, this would be M9K_Colt 1911, I believe, or maybe it's just _1911. This has to be in quotation marks as well. Next up, we have the craft time. And this is the amount of time in seconds that it takes to craft one weapon. So let's say 5 seconds for this. The required level is next, and that is the crafting level required to be able to make this gun. So let's say level 2, you have to be level 2. And lastly, we have experience, and this is the amount of experience points you get from crafting the weapon. So let's say you get 6. Now, if we just save this and open the server, the Colt 1911 should be here. All of these fields are required. You cannot leave any of these out. But there are some optional ones that you can add. The first one being disable ammo. If this is set to true, like so, you will not get ammo when you pick up the weapon that you've crafted. Usually in Guncraft, if we left this out and you went in and crafted a Colt 1911 and picked it up, you would get, I think, around 3 magazines of ammunition. But with this set to true, you will receive no ammunition. Same goes for the shipments as well. Another thing we can do, speaking of shipments, is disable shipment. If this is set to true, you will not be able to craft shipments of this weapon. So the craft shipment button will just not be there. And lastly, we have the bypass function. So this is a bit special. This will allow you to bypass the regular weapon spawning function when you craft this weapon. So if you set this to a function, and we'll give it the arguments of player and data, we'll end it off. If you set this to a function, if you actually include this, the weapon will not spawn when you've crafted it. You will still be deducted the materials, and you will still receive the experience from crafting it, but it will not appear. Instead, it will execute this function. The arguments of the function is the player who crafted it and a data table of basically all of this. So if we say in this function do a print statement and do data.name, this would print to the console Colt 1911 when the weapon is crafted. If we do data.craftTime, there we go, it will print out 5. So yeah, and if we say do apply Steam ID, it will print out the Steam ID of the player who crafted the weapon. Now this is very useful because I've seen a lot of requests of me to add permanent weapons, and there's a nice script that I know some of you use, which is I believe it's called permaweapons, and this we can actually make work with the new bypass function. So we can do run console command in here, and then we can do add permaweapon ID, and we'll give it the argument of the player's Steam ID, and we'll give it the argument of the data class name. So what this will do is, if you have there's a link down here, this script, it will execute the console command add weapon ID, and then followed by the Steam ID of the player, and then followed by the class name. And this will add a permanent weapon to the player, but only if you have this script, of course. Now, I believe there are other permanent weapon scripts which function in other ways. Maybe there's a script that where you would call a function like, I don't know, permawebs.addWeapon, and you would run that function in here. So, but for that exact script, and just to exemplify the bypass function, this is how you would, for instance, run a console command. You could also, yeah, it's a function. You can do whatever you want. You can kill the player who crafts the weapon, whatever you want. So that can be really useful. Now, of course, these last three, they are optional. So you can leave those out, and now it will just be like any other weapon that you've added to Guncraft. Right. Before I head off, I would like to show you that there's also, like before, a preset for the M9K weapons. It's this file here. So if you can open up this, you can actually see that, oh, here we have the Colt 1911, that all the M9K weapons, or at least most of them, are added here. So this just follows the same format all throughout. There's just all the weapons down here. There's a Mossberg. So here you can sort of see the format. If you want to use this preset, if your server has M9K, it's very simple. We simply rename the Guncraft weapons to something else, like old, whatever, and then we rename the M9K one to just Guncraft weapons, and now it will use that preset. In the future I will add more presets, for instance for firearms source I'm planning to add, so those will all be in here, but the preset, the actual file you want to use as your weapons file, needs to be called Guncraft_weapons, and as we see here, it has all the M9K weapons. You can of course change things in here. If you want to change the price of the MP5, you can just change it here. So yeah, that's basically it. Remember to back up all your configuration files when changing stuff, and yeah, I'll see you.